Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I'd appreciate it. I also love it when people leave comments, so feel free to leave a comment if you'd like. So, when I was younger, I was very much into medieval fiction and history, and I remember going to the Renaissance fairs and things like that. It was always fun to imagine what it was like to live back then. And one of the things that I learned how to do because of that was I learned how to make chainmail, which was a type of armor that was used back in the Middle Ages and some other time periods as well. But it involves a whole series of interlocking steel rings, which would protect from cuts and arrows and things like that on the medieval battlefield. So it is popular in jewelry as well, and so I thought I have yet to do that on my channel, so I thought let's do some chainmail jewelry on the channel. So I'm going to make a bracelet today that's a simple 1-in-4 chainmail pattern. At some point or another I may do some of the other ones, but we'll start with this. This is the most basic kind of chainmail you can do, I think. So I picked a green chrysoprase, a little round one that's I think it's probably 6 or 7 millimeters. I'll measure when we get to that point. To be the centerpiece, and then we'll just start making some chainmail and I'll show you how to do it. So before we get started though, I need to thank some people. I have a new patron over on Patreon. It's Kelly R. Thank you so much for signing up. I really appreciate it. I think you'll find that the group over there is super nice and full of all sorts of knowledge. I have learned so much from them, and I hope they're learning some stuff from me as well. I wanted to thank not only Kelly but also my other patrons who've been there for a while. They've created this great environment, and I really appreciate not only their financial support but also their kindness. So, the other group I wanted to thank are my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 12,300, which is an amazing number to me. Thank you all so much for your kindness in the comment section, as well as your contributions like the Buy Me a Coffee and the Super Thanks. Those things really help with the supply costs right now because silver's really high. But thanks. All right, well, let's do some chainmail today. Here's my one of my design idea books. This one's just about filled up. When I started the YouTube channel, I started sketching up everything that I make beforehand, and I really have found that it made a pretty big improvement in the skill levels because I have more of a concrete plan in my mind about where I'm going with things, and it's also got this nice dot matrix in the background that kind of helps me to keep things sort of symmetrical, although you might not be able to tell from my drawings today. Alright, so like I said, we're going to do some chainmail. Here's the little chrysoprase, round chrysoprase stone that I found for this. Find my little ruler here. Estimate of what size he is. It's about a 7, I think, between a 6 and a 7, somewhere there, and which corresponds with about the size of the rings that I'm going to make. So here's my plan. I'm going to make a little step bezel setting for this, and I'm going to solder 2 of these rings on either side like this, as well as soldering them to themselves to be kind of the basis for the center part of the bracelet. And then the rest of it's just going to be chainmail links going all the way to a clasp that's probably going to be just kind of a simple kind of hook clasp. So we'll see how that goes. Chainmail, basic chainmail is pretty easy to do. You just got to make sure to keep track of which orientation you have the rings in when you're making it. And I'm going to make this out of 18 gauge round wire, and 18 gauge is 0.102 millimeters, I think. I will double check that and put it in the description because I forgot to write that down. But these rings themselves, I made them about 2/10 of an inch, which turns out to be about 5.08 millimeters. And what I did was I used a little brass rod that I just had laying around, and I'll show you how I made the jump rings on that. And we'll make some and then hook them together. The thing to know, if you've never done chainmail before, it's basically, I drew it from the top here because you got two rings interlocked with a third, and then two rings interlocked with a third, and then two rings interlocked with a third, and they just kind of goes down the line like that. And if you look at it from the side, this is a little bit exaggerated. The rings lay like this, alternating angles like that, because they can't lay perfectly flat because they're interlocked with each other, so they can only go so horizontal. I will show you, when I was in college, I did some, like I said, I learned how to do this. These are steel rings. And you can see here, that it makes kind of a cool mesh that moves interestingly, you know. But we're just going to make the first three rows there. So it's basically these two rings, and then this one goes through those, and then it goes through two other ones that are facing this way, and then this one's kind of facing this way. This way, this way, this way, this way. So we're going to just work our way down like that, and then put that stone in the middle, and then make a clasp. That's a shirt that I never quite completed because it's pretty tedious making thousands and thousands of rings over and over. I even started what would have been headgear, coif, which is more of a circular pattern where you're starting at a central point and just going around in circles like that. And this would drape over the head, and then I would have had an opening in the front here for your face, and then come back together and drape over your shoulders. But again, tedious, but kind of interesting. All right, so to start with, though, let's make a bezel for this little guy. I'm going to use a 26 gauge 3/16 inch tall bezel strip made out of fine silver. It's been quite a while since I've done this, so I hope I remember how to do it right. You can also interlock a much tighter weave with, instead of 4 rings going through each one, you can have 6 rings going through each one, or 8 rings going through each one, if you want to make a really kind of snake-like tight pattern, which maybe I'll do at some point if you guys like this video. So, let's make a bezel first. The dimensions of that shirt that I was making back in college would not fit me anymore. We're going to do an open back bezel on this one. If you're brand new at this, you might want to try a closed back bezel first. And I have some videos about that, in fact quite a few of them. So if you haven't seen it already, I have a new ebook that I uploaded recently, which is a guide to all of the videos I did in 2023. I'll put a link up here if you're interested. It's a useful guide to the videos in that it has a picture of the drawing that I made to start with. It has a picture of the final product or products. It has a list of materials you need to make the project, and I made some individual notes about each one. Things like, was it a hard project? Did I struggle with any particular part of it? Or would I have done something different if I was to redo it? And there's also a link right to the video itself. So there's a whole bunch of content right at your fingertips. So it's kind of a cool deal. I'll probably do one for each year, I would guess. Alright, so let's solder this together. I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything. Although for this project, I'm actually going to be using, because we're having a million little rings soldered together, I'm going to use some easy paste solder for some of them. That'll just make it a little less likely that I'm going to solder something together that I don't want to solder together. But primarily I use hard silver sheet solder for everything. I also use a liquid flux. I either spray on or dribble on. Lately I've been dribbling more than spraying. Okay. With bezels, there's not a lot of metal in them, so it doesn't take very long to solder them. So people sometimes melt them a lot at the beginning. So if you do that, don't get too frustrated. You kind of get the hang of it after a while. But you see how quickly that solder flowed. I'm just going to reshape it into the shape of the stone. I usually use the tips of my needle nose. Just kind of get the big bends out of it. You can use bail making pliers, or you could use your jump ring mandrel or bezel mandrel, whatever you like. That looks pretty good. Okay, in order to create a step for this, I'm going to put a little ring in there made out of 18 gauge wire. Here's a bit of 18. So let's make one that just fits in there perfect. I like to cut them just a little bit big and then gradually snip out little pieces until they fit snugly in there without a gap. Oh, and thank you to the people who've already downloaded the book. It seems pretty popular, so I really appreciate your support. There we go. Got to make sure it's sitting flat and not riding up to either side. We'll just solder this together. Oftentimes I'll just make a little circle out of some solder pieces. Well, I guess with 4 pieces it's going to look like a square. And we'll flux this, and then I'll just set it right on there, and it should just draw it right up in the solder joint. If you watched my last video, several people asked me why I use a Dremel tool rather than a Fordham when I have a Fordham. And the answer to that is that my Fordham that I have is secondhand and it doesn't work very well. And I just haven't had the spare money to buy a nice one. So when my ship comes in, I will get myself a brand new Fordham. Plus the one I have, it does work, it just doesn't, the motor doesn't work very well. So, and the handpiece on it is hard to change bits in, so I need to get one of those handpieces that is a kind of a quick change one, because who wants to have to unscrew it each time with a chuck key and everything? That's kind of a pain. So we need to make some rings here, and like I said, this is about 2/10 of an inch, or think, what was it, 5.08 millimeters, I believe. And I'm going to use 18 gauge round wire. I'm going to cut a little more manageable piece off of here. And you can make your jump rings however you want, but this was about the right size for what I was doing, and so I usually just kind of grab it to get it started like this. Just start wrapping it around. You can change the look of it quite a bit by changing the size of the wire you're using and the size of the rings. If you experiment a little bit, also mixing sizes of rings makes for some interesting looks. But things don't always lay nicely if you have odd proportions to the gauge of the wire and the size of the rings. So an easy way to do this and have pretty neat edges is I cut a notch in the end of this. And you can do this on your bench pin or whatever. I'm just going to do it in front of the camera here. You should be able to just kind of run the saw right up that notch. As long as you keep it lined up with that notch, you can just keep knocking rings off of there. There's all sorts of devices you can get that simplify making jump rings, but you don't really need those. The only reason I'm doing it this way instead of just cutting them off with wire cutters is because I'm going to be soldering all of these closed, and I want to make sure that I have a nice clean end, or a pretty clean end. So I'm just going to keep doing that for a while, and I'll be right back. So I have a little pile of rings here, and to start with I need 4 of them to solder to this thing. And so I'm going to close up 4 of these, make sure they're nice and round. Sometimes they get a little distorted when you're shaping them. That's pretty good. I'm going to put this stone somewhere else so I don't lose him. Start with, let's just solder I'm going to solder these ones opening to opening, save myself soldering them twice. But let's cut some little tiny pieces of solder. I'm going to actually set them on this pad so I can access them. If you've never seen pick soldering, that's something that I do a lot. And that means I'm going to be picking up a little bit on the end of this soldering pick, and then get this up to the right temperature, and then touch it there, and then it flows on there. And that's a real useful skill to have. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, there's a link up there for you. All right. Pick up a little bit of solder there. Just heat this up to the soldering temperature. So just jump on there. Okay. Now, what I was thinking, let's just solder this like this, and then straight across from that. Make sure they're pretty parallel. Just solder them to the edge of the bezel like that. And it just kind of jumps right in there. Okay, so I'm going to let that pickle for a while. And in the meantime, I'm going to solder about half of these closed with the hard silver sheet solder like I was just using, because we're going to link 4 of them through a ring and solder that ring closed, and then link a ring through 2 of those plus 2 more and then solder it closed. I'll show you. But first we need to solder some of these closed. You could probably do this without soldering these closed. However, a sharp yank on it by a kid or something is going to probably pull some of the rings open, and just over time you may have some of them pull apart. But if you were using thicker wire, like 14 gauge, you'd be less likely to have them pull apart easily. But it would also be a much bolder piece of jewelry. So. Did I miss any? Probably, but I don't see which one. Okay, I'll let those cool off for a minute. Okay, we can start assembling these a little bit now. I'm going to take one of these ones that's not soldered, and I'm actually going to put 4 of them on here. 4 of the soldered closed ones, I should say. And then I'm going to close that up. And this is where I'm going to use the easy solder when I'm soldering these center ones. I'm probably going to do it in a 3rd hand in order to kind of isolate the ring that I'm soldering from everything else. That way I can direct the heat from the side a little bit and not really get those too hot anyway. Put a little dab on there. I'm going to heat the 3rd hand a bit because it soaks up a lot of heat. So now we've got 4 rings soldered on here, and they're all flopping around loosely like that. What we need to do is we need to orient them in the right way, and they need to be kind of splayed, like 2 of them like that, spread out so that they're both going through the same way. And then these ones are going to be laying the same way, just on the other side like this. Okay? So in order to get those to stay, you need to feed one of these through in the same direction, like that, so it'll stay like that. If you do it the other way, they're just going to line up next to each other. I'll show you. Watch. See, I went in from the bottom over the top. If I go in from the top like this, they'll end up just doing that. So I want to make sure to go from the bottom over the top like that. And then remember, we have to add 2 more of those closed ones on there. Like that. Then we'll close this up. Ah! Whoops. Get that lined up. And then we can do the same thing we did a minute ago. Just put a little paste on there. I'm new to using soldering paste. I've never really used it until recently when I like it, although it does produce a lot of smoke as the binder burns off. It's kind of stinky a little bit. See how I have the flame sideways when I'm doing this? Kind of lay it out so you can kind of see how it's looking now. So we got 2 middle ones and 6 outer ones. So now we need another one of these. 2 more of these. Now we got 3 in the middle and 8 on the outside. So we're just going to keep working our way down until it's as long as we want it to be. And then we can attach it to that central piece. Once we have, well, we're having to make 2 of them about 3 inches long, I think, which would be 7.5 centimeters-ish on each side, maybe. With my amazing mathematical calculations in my head are right. That was sarcasm if you did not recognize it. It's not a bad idea to check each of these solder joints after you do them to make sure they took well enough. We'll do maybe one more, and then I'll probably do the rest off camera, so you don't have to watch me do the same thing over and over again. So I'm going to do the rest off camera there, and then we'll come back and we'll start hooking things together and put a clasp on it. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I have most of this assembled. I went ahead and hooked this side on. It's pretty tricky soldering without remelting something else here, so I'm going to try and get this side connected as well, but I wanted to try one of them off camera. And I did make a little kind of shepherd's crook sort of clasp, which I'll show you in a minute. And let's see if we can get this guy to solder without messing anything up. Okay, hopefully we didn't inadvertently solder anything together. Let's give it a cool off and see. Take a look at it. So you see how I hooked this hook through, just like I was going to hook another ring through there. And I think I'm going to flatten this out to make it so it's nice and springy. And honestly, for this one, I think maybe I need to hook a ring through this side so it's going in the correct direction to hook on that clasp, just like that, and maybe just solder that closed. I'm going to use this magnesia block to kind of keep things from heating that I don't want to heat. And I'm just going to put a little more of that paste solder. You won't be able to see because of this magnesia block. I can't get that to flow. Go like that. That'll be cool, I think. So let's let that pickle. After it's all pickled, I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna flatten this out a little bit. Get that all nice and tight so it just snaps in there and stays. So let's pickle that for a while, and then we'll set that stone and call it good. Got everything all polished up. Got the bezel filed down to the level that I want it to be in order to set this. And I do this a little different than some people do. I use the flat side of my chain nose pliers here to do the bezel pushing. So I'm going to push that inwards first. Last stage is going to be kind of burnishing with this rounded outer part. And to do that, I'm going to push down on that top edge like that. Using as much force as I can muster. Okay, well, that's kind of what I was shooting for. Fun part about chainmail is how it moves, I think. It kind of compresses like that and stretches out. So it's just kind of a fun design. All right, well, I will take some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well that was a basic chainmail bracelet with a chrysoprase. I hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And I'd love it if you'd watch a couple of more videos that I've put out. If you peruse my channel, you'll find there's well over 330 videos there now. Lots of content for different skill levels, and I think you'll almost certainly find something you can use there. So check a few of those out. Come back and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Don't forget to check out the video description down below as well. There's some important links there. There's a link to my safety video. There's a link to where you can download my new ebook, which I just finished not too long ago. It's a guide to all of the YouTube and Patreon videos I did in 2023. So it includes some It includes the original sketch that I drew, the final product, a picture of that, a list of materials you need to make the project, some notes about the project, like what I might do different if I was to do it again, things like that, and also a link right to the video itself. So check that out, download it. I think you'll find it's a useful guide to a whole bunch of different fun projects to make. All right, well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Happy silversmithing.